My name is Rose, and I never imagined that at 68 years old, I would learn what betrayal truly feels like. Not from strangers, but from the very people I spent my entire life loving and protecting. For 5 quiet years after my husband Henry passed away, I lived alone in the 2-story house he worked his whole life to give me. It wasn't a mansion, it wasn't luxurious, but it was home. The walls still carried Henry's laughter. The porch still smelled of the wood oil he used, and every morning, when sunlight entered the kitchen, I could almost hear his voice asking if I wanted tea. That house was the last piece of him I had left. I have one son, Daniel, and his wife, Claire. They visited occasionally, birthdays, holidays, the usual obligations that keep families from drifting too far apart. Or so I thought. For a long time, I told myself their distance was just life being busy. But looking back, it wasn't busyness, it was calculation. The last time Daniel and I had a truly warm conversation was nearly 3 years ago. After that, everything shifted. His tone grew cold. Claire's smile became thin and forced. They always whispered to each other in corners. They always looked around my house as if appraising it, measuring things, noticing the furniture, asking strange questions about bank accounts. I should have known something was wrong. But a mother's heart, it always hopes. One ordinary afternoon, everything collapsed. I had just returned from the grocery store. My knees were aching, and all I wanted was to sit, drink warm tea, and rest. But the moment I reached the front gate, the bags slipped from my hands. All of my belongings, my clothes, my books, my photo albums, even my wedding dress, were thrown across the lawn like trash. At first, I thought someone had broken into the house, until I saw Daniel standing in the doorway, arms crossed, as if he'd been waiting. "Daniel," I whispered, "what happened? Why is everything outside?" He didn't blink. He didn't smile. His voice was flat. "Mom, from today on, this house belongs to Claire and me. You should move into assisted living. We've already decided." My breath stopped. "Move where?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Daniel, this house, your father left it to me. I've lived here for over 40 years. But Daniel stepped aside and Claire appeared behind him. She folded her arms, lifted her chin, and said, "Do you have paperwork to prove that? Any documents? Deeds? A will? No? Then the law will recognize us as the rightful heirs, and we're ready to renovate, so please cooperate." Her words stabbed deeper than any knife. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. "Claire, you can't just do this to me. I'm your husband's mother." She shrugged, "And we're adults who have our own lives. We don't have time to babysit a 70-year-old. The house is better in our hands." Daniel didn't say a word. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. He simply closed the door right in my face. That night, humiliated and heartbroken, I slept on a friend's couch. I cried silently, asking Henry for help, for guidance, for anything, because I felt like I was losing my world. 3 days later, just when despair began to swallow me whole, my phone rang. It was Mr. Collins, Henry's longtime lawyer. His voice was urgent. "Rose, come to my office as soon as possible. Henry left something for you, something you were never supposed to open unless trouble came." My heart pounded as I traveled to his office. When I arrived, he handed me a thick, sealed envelope. The paper was yellowed with age. My husband's handwriting covered the front. "For Rose, only when she needs protection." My eyes burned as tears gathered. Mr. Collins looked at me gently. Henry foresaw the possibility that Daniel might be influenced or driven by greed. He wanted to make sure you were always safe, no matter what. With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. Inside was Henry's final will, written and certified. And as I read the first lines, my knees nearly gave out. I leave all my assets, savings, and property to my wife, Rose. My son, Daniel, will only receive inheritance if he cares for his mother with respect and loyalty. Should he fail to do so, his portion will be revoked, and the entirety of my estate will remain in Rose's possession. I felt a rush of emotions: relief, sorrow, betrayal, love. Everything mixed together until I could barely breathe. But it didn't end there. Inside the envelope was the official house deed, a bank statement showing $240,000, and a USB stick labeled, "For when the truth is too heavy." Mr. Collins put a hand on my shoulder. "Rose, you must confront them. And if they deny the will, I'll back you. This is legal. You are protected." For the first time in days, I felt Henry beside me, still watching over me, still defending me. I returned home the next morning. Daniel and Claire were inside, laughing, making plans about their new home, picking paint colors, talking about knocking down walls, like I was already gone. I walked to the dining table, placed the will in front of them, and stepped back. Claire grabbed it and skimmed the pages. Her face turned paper white. This is forged. It has to be." I lifted my chin. "It is certified by the court, by Henry's lawyer. There is a video, too." Daniel slammed his hands on the table. "Mom, you can't do this. You're leaving us with nothing." My voice cracked, but I held steady. "I didn't do anything, Daniel. Your father offered you love and responsibility. You chose neither." As if on cue, the door opened, and Mr. Collins walked in with 2 official witnesses. In a firm voice, he declared, "By law, Rose is the sole owner of this house and all related assets. Daniel has no legal claim. Any attempt to take possession constitutes eviction and illegal seizure." Claire sank into a chair, speechless. Daniel stared at the floor, breathing heavily. And for the first time, the house felt like mine again. Not because of the paper, but because I finally stood up for myself. That night, when silence filled every room, I sat on my bed and held the USB Henry left from me. My hands trembled as I plugged it into the laptop. The screen lit up, and there he was, my Henry, pale, thin, lying in a hospital bed, but still wearing that warm smile I knew so well. He spoke softly. "Rose, my love, if you're watching this, then Daniel, he's lost his way, and I'm sorry. I saw how he acted during my illness, how indifferent he had become. Please, but listen to me. I still believe our son can change. He may choose greed now, but he wasn't always this way. Forgive him if he ever comes back with a sincere heart." Tears streamed down my face. Even while dying, Henry was thinking of us, thinking of healing, not revenge. I cried for a long, long time. A week passed. Then one evening, I heard soft knocking at the door. When I opened it, Daniel was kneeling outside, his face swollen from crying. He whispered, Mom, I'm sorry. Claire, she pushed me. I was stupid. I forgot who you are. I forgot everything Dad taught me. Please, please forgive me. My heart broke. No matter what he did, he was still my son. I reached out and touched his cheek. Daniel, I don't need money. I don't need power. All I ever needed was my family. He collapsed into my arms, crying like he used to when he was a boy. And in that moment, the house finally felt warm again. Not because of inheritance, not because of documents or property, but because forgiveness can rebuild what greed tried to destroy. And that is the story of how I rose, nearly lost everything, and found something even more precious in return.